Okay. Good morning, good evening, boys and girls. Well, it's actually surprising that it's not just our manly bros that are attending these particular broadcasts. A lot of our female viewers are as well, and so I just want to cheers. Yes, that's right. That's right. Well, maybe perhaps they see something in it that you guys don't, huh? Anyway, so we're gonna answer this question, and then we're gonna do squirrels, and then we're going to call it a day. I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't think this question is going to take that long, though. Yeah, because it is a rather should we say annoying one. Well, I mean, the lot of you have given me quite a few answers that are really unrealistic. So today we have to kind of deal with that just a little bit while we talk about realistic answers. And realistic answers are going to be hard in this case for red and blue because there is just overwhelming force, right? So something I think we talked about last time was the existence of this bridge, or this line. This line, if held properly, is actually very good for red and blue. Oof! What is this? What is this? Let's do 5. There we go. So this line, if held well, is good for red and blue. This bridge is you can consider this bridge basically unforceable, right? Like if there's enough just infantry here, it's much easier for the army to just like move away to somewhere else. So the key is going to be this particular bridge, right? This we can hold with 2 corps and some amount of cannons, and I mean it'll be a difficult fight, but there won't be like if Guri concentrates down here, he'll get a flank attack, right? Obviously, and if he does invest town A and then tries to force this, then that gives red and blue enough time to actually force march more people into this area. And so, like, yeah, essentially defenders of town B just cross and defend the other side of the shore, and everything else is exactly. Yes, exactly. It's like my boy says. Um, I mean, if you say it like that now, why didn't you give me an answer like that? Why did you give me this weird, like, maneuvering attempt to, like, I don't even know what your answer was. Like, it didn't even make sense because nobody would maneuver down here, right? Like, to get this entire army down here is just kind of like a pipe dream. Anyway, so obviously first thing we do is we turn the cavalry around, and these heavy cavalry are going essentially on a death ride. Like, they are unfortunately in this case there is some sacrifice to be had, so this is not going to be a easy fight, even though they are charging into infantry, right? They're going to be flanked, they're going to be hit by the artillery. The point of this ride is to buy time for the infantry army to disengage and leave. And surprisingly, perhaps these guys have it the easiest, right? Because they are farthest away. Even if the hussars attempt to cut this off, like, this area is not a very easy terrain for horses to come down on, right? Like, humans are much better at dealing with slopes like this than horses, right? This is a 40-meter drop over a couple hundred meters, so that's not. I mean, it's not exactly a very steep slope, but it's also not a very like it's not like this. But even so, like you're still going to get you're still going to get uh like how do I say this? Like the horses are just bad down slopes like that. Like charging down a slope is great if it's like this, right? Like 20 meters over what 5 kilometers. That's gonna give the horses a nice, or even here is okay. But once you get into this steepness, it's not worth it. So you have to get off the horses, and like the horses themselves have to be balanced very carefully as they go down. No, so essentially what's going to happen is these guys are going to retreat to the back. Obviously, we literally just talked about that. So this is going to go in this direction. This is going to go in this direction, right? So already these two corps are much better off, right? Like there is a town to their right, so it's hard, even if the hussars somehow manage it, for black to what do you call it, envelop from the right side. And from the left, we've just talked about it, is basically impossible. So these guys are fine. This entire corps is of course going to retreat into town A, and that just makes sense, right? Like with your artillery by the shore or somewhere in the middle of town, it's just easy to defend and rather difficult to fight. And at a time like this, that's actually really good. Yeah. Bridges. You theoretically you could close the bridges by having enough artillery, just like around here. But if you want to get close enough to the bridge, you'll expose your own artillery, even though the Krupp guns are much better. To get close enough to the bridges, like you'd have to either push with your infantry into the town, or expose them to counter battery fire from the slightly weaker red and blue artillery, right? So it means that it's rather difficult to. Yes, it means it's rather difficult to try to take this. So let's just move all of the cavalry up. I guess these two infantry divisions can just sit somewhere around here. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Actually, let's just group this up like that. Excellent. It's interesting. Okay, I say it's interesting because I'm a huge nerd. Well, I am. At least in terms of military history and actually history of international relations. I am such a huge nerd for the Great Game. Oh my god. Oh, the Great Game is just, it's one of those most beautiful things. Obviously, like it's not actually beautiful, but it's like it's rather well played by everyone. I can talk about it in the future, but the Great Game is essentially what the term we use for great power, like late Victorian era great power. How do you say? Rivalry, and how that really was expressed in terms of how do I say, like in terms of espionage, in terms of how people behaved, in terms of the kind of investments that the great powers, and so late Victorian great powers, so that's what Russia, Austria, um, Prussia, Brandenburg, Prussia, but at that point, France, Great Britain, right? So those are the big five, and then US pops in at the very end of the Victorian era. Yeah, exactly. It's about diplomacy, but also about espionage, about maneuvering, not with armies, but with fighting a more civilized conflict, so to speak, right? Because the Napoleonic Wars had left Europe quite badly off, right? That was quite a few years of combat, on and off, almost 20 years, right? From the initial French Revolution to the to Waterloo. So yeah, exactly. So the boys and girls that led these particular countries didn't really want that anymore. So of course they chose, or they thought they would choose to spend their money in a different place, such that wars don't have to be fought. And so that's partly what the Great Game is about. So we'll see these guys retreat in stages like this. So basically, out of these hussars, yes, the heavy cavalry, we're probably going to erase that much, and then everything else just pushes forward over their corpse. Well, not their corpse, obviously. Like there will be survivors, but those survivors will be they will survive in individual units and not as a full formation, and that's tragic, right? Yeah. Well, yeah, because the idea is, if you can break a formation and it cannot reconstitute itself, then it's not really a threat anymore, right? It stops being a threat if it cannot fight as an efficient formation, and that's that's par for the course. Yes, I'm just moving these so that they I can move them as a unit, because now that our hypothetical black force has the manpower in place, suddenly these things can be moved as a unit, and so it's easier to do so, right? Like that. Um, so we have the dragoons here, and the dragoons, obviously they didn't end up doing anything. They just they manage very little. But that's, like, we had already talked about the downsides of dragoons quite enough times, so I'm not going to go into that. Yeah, exactly. They because they're on horses, because they use carbines, it's just a little bit less likely for them to be able to do anything. So let's see. This gets pushed in that direction, pushed in that. There we go. But of course, these guys go over here. And we're starting to see essentially what we talked about at the beginning, and that is this division of the red and blue forces into critical town A, town B, and then holding of the, I guess, the what is this? I-14, I-15 square. Right. Let's move all of that artillery up. We're basically done. Yeah. And then we'll do squirrels, and then we'll be done for today. We might even not hit the hour mark. Isn't that amazing? Well, I mean, for a given kind of amazing, I guess. So with our infantry like that, the dragoons didn't manage to chase them down quickly enough. So obviously, like, dragoons aren't going to force this. That's unreasonable. So they're going to have to wait for infantry to come. We're gonna have this move onto this side. This move onto this side. That's a good question. Is there a case for keeping a bridgehead? In this case, no. In this case, no. Because if red were to stay here, there is no cover here, and the offensive ability of that artillery is just going to completely wreck anything that red or blue can put in its way, right? And so then in that case, that would just lead to death and destruction and just general sadness, really. But across the bridge, these artillery pieces, they can't. What was their range? I think it was 2 or 3 kilometers. So they can just barely reach this part of the shore, but they cannot reach a safe space, or rather they cannot reach the red artillery, which means that the red artillery is poised to be able to just like at will fire at whomever is trying to organize into effect here. And that's great. That means this is fairly well covered, and so red and blue, all they have to worry about are the bridges upstream, which is town A and town B. And again, we talked about the fact that town B is actually a nice buffer for the fourth bridge, and if anything were to happen at town B, there should be enough time for fighting retreat, but also for reinforcements from the south or from town A to come and block that off. Right? But obviously, well, obviously you don't want to give up these towns if you don't have to, because they provide valuable resources. Well, besides population, there's also just like it is much better to tie up. Yeah, exactly. Like if you have these bridgeheads in town A and town B, you're much less likely to see the entire black army just bugger off somewhere else, right? Like they have to screen this. If they don't, then any kind of sally from these positions will be dangerous. Like say the black army now chose to sort of go towards northwest. I don't think it would be. It certainly wouldn't be safe for them. Especially, actually, I keep forgetting this, but thanks for reminding me. Especially because red and blue rifles are significantly better, right? And that means, yeah, because no, I'm not going to respond to that. Well, yeah. So because red and blue rifles are just significantly better, they have like how much? I think almost double the range, right? Double the range of the black rifles, and so the defense in these towns is just better, unless black is willing to go like total war to just like level these towns. But if they did that, I mean, that would have political repercussions, right? Because remember, the timeline that we're working on is, we just talked about the Victorian era. This is Victorian era timeline. So like the ordnance and the weaponry that's being used are all from about 1870s. So we're going to assume that the politics is about the same as the 1870s. Right? I'm not saying that this is a easily defendable line like this, but to me at least, the only realistic way of retreating would be to these points. Right? This is a 10-ish kilometer line. This is a 10-ish kilometer line. This is the 10-ish kilometer line, and you can cover that with, a few corps and artillery, and especially if you have advantage in your rifles. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course. Again, right? Like if the Black Force decided now to reduce these towns, absolutely they could. There is enough artillery here to probably slowly demolish the entire thing, but like that's hardcore, right? That's a 5 kilometer town that you have to demolish in diameter. That's a lot of ordnance. That's a lot of explosives. Like there is a reason why city fighting doesn't usually come to systematically leveling buildings, because that's like that. No. Exactly. It's you just wouldn't be able to justify it from an economic standpoint, right? Because think about it. An artillery shell, even a modern day artillery shell, probably can take out one bungalow, and that's about it. Much less, this is the 1870s, when we had very little excuse me. Sorry, just needed to cough, but couldn't. Yeah, in the 1870s, when we didn't really have the concept, we couldn't really put into action the concept of high explosive, right? Like sure you could set fire to the town, absolutely 100%, and like that could probably get you 70% of the way there, but that's a lot of civilians that you're just burning alive, right? So I don't think that's reasonable. No. Well, not in. And this is a big qualifier, but I think it sort of remains the point that if we were talking about this as if it were a civilized war, or a quote unquote civilized war, right? Because the war is never really civilized, but like there was the claim in the 1870s, in the Victorian era, that you were never in total war, because that's just not what was done. And so and so, like, if you are in total war, then oops. No. See, I think the difference is, how do we say? The difference is that total war like that requires not just a willing population, but a capable industry. And certainly in the Victorian era, we didn't have, the key things between like the 1870 and 1910 and the first and the first World War is simply just like the chemical processes. Like, we needed the chemistry to be able to create smokeless powder in vast quantities. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like it was definitely an engineering problem. Unfortunately, it was an engineering problem that was solved by the First World War, and that's why it like the uniqueness of the First World War is very, very interesting because both sides thought that they could attain sort of dominance on the Western Front, Western Front, on which is the line between Germany and France, and so by doing so, they filled it with too much manpower. Yeah, yeah, they filled it with too much manpower, and that's why that entire front bogged down, right? Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly it. It was that unique combination of just enough industrialization to feed that manpower and just enough manpower to Mhm. That's why we got trenches. That's why we got trenches. Yes. Okay, let's do this part real quick. Uh so first of all, some things have changed here. 28th, 25th, 7th, 10th, 4th, 1st, 34th. Excellent. So things are now stabilizing with the right recap. Yes, completely forgot about the recap. So what happened last time was, or what really changed was the decision by Field Marshal Thatcher to withdraw from the salient, which was the Fenchurch salient here, which was the Army Group Eastern Front, and like there were legit reasons why he chose to do so, because an entire field army was stuck in a gigantic salient with very little path for retreating, and that was just never going to remain tenable for very long. Well, because sooner or later, the technocracy would have just pulled forces from other sides, or just like eaten some advances here on the north side to completely shut down this path. And once that path is shut down, this army is just going to starve to death. And yet they're squirrels, but they're still going to starve to death, right? So yeah, essentially that's the point. So in between then and now, essentially the because of that move, it allowed General High Branch of the Fifth Army and her entire army to essentially be let loose eastwards. And so they started here and just kept bounding and bounding. And because there were only so few crossings in between, it meant that the First Army that was just pulled out of the salient couldn't actually be used against it, so they had to keep following the eastward bounding army. And so they finally caught up here. What is this? The Wathy Street? Yeah, something along those lines. They caught up here, and so they've managed to establish a bridgehead on the north that the technocracy is now very much busily trying to reduce. But of course, like having said all of that, both sides are exhausted, right? Like both sides are absolutely just like that kind of march in a single day is going to be exhausting for any kind of squirrel. so this front is actually going to kind of like settle down for a little bit. The Pomeranians though, because they're mounted, right? Like these are these are squirrels mounted on dogs, remember, on Pomeranian dogs. They're going to essentially go in this direction, and because there's nothing here, there's nothing really here, but the Pomeranians themselves can't really extend too much away from the armies. They have to operate close to. Oh, I should move that. They have to operate close to logistics, and so that's what this is. And yeah, exactly. First army group is now so deep in this side that I think actually we should create a second army group. Well, because Maplewood deserves a deserve is a strong word, but he gets a promotion. Let's see, what is this? This is now 90 by 90. So let's set this to 90 by 90. That does not look right. Oh, right, because that's the wrong counter for it. Oh my god. This is 250 by 125. And then this will be the second army group. Oops. Well, no, I realize it's niche, but I don't particularly care. Like it's fine for something to be niche. Let's see, that's going to be 9. So same thing now. Essentially, what's happening is that because of how deep the 5th Army is and how much General Elm of the 1st Army Group has to go in that direction to follow and to, like administer all of this, all of this area. The 2nd Army Group was created back home from the south of the 1st Army, and like it's really just responsible for this part of the front. And this is actually kind of still the dynamic part of the front, right? Like even now. Oh, did I leave those arrows there? Oof. You don't need to remind me of these things. Well, it's more than that. It's this idea that it's a little bit unprofessional for me to do that. But a quick recap of the Western Front. Essentially, there was a bunch of back and forth, but reinforcements came, stabilized the line, and again the technocracy took advantage of an overreach. There should be 7, by the way. Yes, took advantage of an overreach to do a counterattack, which, while it didn't surround any of the collective forces, it pushed them back enough that things have sort of settled back down a little bit. And so that's this gone. Wait, what did I just delete? Yes, I did just delete these 2, didn't I? It turns out there was another one there. Okay, well that's fine. No, I don't mean excellent work. This is not. I wish this were excellent work. No. What? There was another one? Oof. Okay. So between the 2 bombardments of the 2 artillery corps, that has sort of remained. And then we're going to see, oops, we're going to see this one move up to here. See that disappear. And then we're going to see another, oops. So, yes, exactly. The advantage of artillery still remains in the hands of the technocracy. That doesn't mean that they can just do whatever they want, because these engineering, combat engineering forces now exist, which can really like push if there was no artillery in the vicinity, right? And so really, like, the artillery and the combat engineers sort of cancel each other out if they had enough of them. But of course, the technocracy does have a few more artillery pieces than the collective has combat engineers. I didn't forget this side, don't worry. So they've come here. The 12th has come here. And there is a similar kind of race going on in the south, which is, this is a nice natural barrier, and no squirrel's gonna cross that. Like, sure, the combat engineers probably could, but then they wouldn't get enough reinforcements to be able to hold these kinds of lines. So, oops. So the point was that if the technocracy were able to create these, to hold these crossings, then essentially they would have completely taken all of this territory in the south. And as we shall see, it ends here, which means that all of this is now suddenly technocratic territory with very little that the collective can really do, right? And the collective has to be very careful, because a sally out of here will hit the back of the first army, and that's going to be a bit of a question. Well, yeah, I mean, that's why these things are difficult, right? That's why these things are hard, and that's why these things are fun-ish to me. I was about to say that, even though I'm a huge nerd, but that you took the words right out of my mouth, bro. Oops. The 15th? You mean this one, right? No, this one isn't getting left there. So essentially what's happening here is, because there's only a single division, the 16th really, these two are really evenly matched. And because of the way that this primary school is set, any squirrel, just like, you could have a single regiment up here and it can shut down any crossing, basically. Like, unless they mass a lot of them, right? Or hypothetically, unless, something that is not that afraid of rifles appears, which is of course why the 8th artillery is in this position now, because this way it can cover both this end and this end, right? And that's a lucky break, right? So yeah. So right now, you mean? Right now, the 8th controls these 3, and then the 5th controls these 3. Yes. We are in the process of moving the 9th artillery over, though. So this is going to go in that direction to join the 5th. Well, because so right now this area doesn't really it's not very suitable for campaigning, right? Like these are very short frontages. Yeah, so that means you can only put so much manpower, squirrel power, in the same or not in the same place, but rather in the same along the front. So you don't have enough firepower. Especially with things like buildings, like you can't really climb those buildings without just a lot of a lot of willpower. Exactly. Yes, let's go with willpower. Oops. Okay, so second part of the day. Yeah, that was the first part, really. I haven't even really talked about this, but essentially what's happening is the 60th Corps and the 5th Army are swinging backwards because that's too dangling of a front, right? And because they've not heard anything from the east, so they have to assume that there is going to be some danger coming in that direction. And in this case, they are correct. Well, I mean, the point is for them to be really smart, isn't it? They are really smart because they are smart, and that's kind of the point of it. Right, so the 60th Corps is slowly sort of trying to cover its own left flank, because keep in mind this is where reinforcements are coming from, and that's good because that means that means, you know, like this area is pretty safe. Actually, let's put in some lines there. That area is pretty safe. Just security elements, etc., etc. Technically, all of these area, you would have, you know, a little bit of civilians and like rare echelon units, but with the breakthrough here, obviously all of these guys got pulled backwards, right? And it just kind of makes sense to man a line that you know you can defend instead of have little units that get chewed up by puppies. Yeah, exactly. Like if you can mangle together security elements into, or like, you know, like logistics officers, well, I mean, an army needs to eat, right? So where does all that supply come from? It has to come from somewhere. And so in this case, it does come from the back, from the rear, and someone needs to get it out there. And so you can take all of those units and you can either let them be overrun individually, or you can let them sort of form a more coherent force. Even if it's not the strongest, it is still much better than if they were alone, right? And that's the key. So as this front is turning, let's say this is going in this direction, it's going in that direction. Good. That's, wait, we did that already. There's nothing happening here because both sides are exhausted, but there's more happening down here. Right, they are, both sides actually don't know how much force is on each side, but the point of this is to come to the rear to attack the 12th division, and the point of these are essentially what we talked about before, which is to hold the key, right? Like if you can hold this area along with the bridge, this is basically held. So what we have is the 30th going going in that direction. Yes. And then the 15th going even further to the east to start entrenching itself here. Oops. Well, a little bit, yes, I will admit. No, so never assume that because there is no icon that there's no one here. There's definitely still people around here. They're just not people. I say military formations. It's just difficult for us to represent how a division gets strung out across an entire front, right? Like instead of it being a continuous line with, like, the idea of a line with soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder and then marching forward is a very Napoleonic. Yeah, it still happened in the Victorian era, absolutely, because that was how the doctrine worked. But by the late Victorian era and before the First World War, things have started becoming much more dynamic. Right? Because firepower has grown to the point where if you were to stand as line infantry, standing in a line, coincidentally, that's where the word line infantry even comes from. If you were to have them stand in a line, it would be ridiculous. Like, they would just get mowed down by like a single grenade or a single high explosive cannon shell. Yeah, absolutely. So this gets pushed back. No, that's not what they're doing. I'm not gonna repeat that. Why do you keep insisting on saying these things that are just mean-spirited? Leave the squirrels alone. They just want to be loved. Okay, that's not strictly true. Oh, come on. Actually, I wouldn't even know what kind of, that's a good question. Sorry, just responding off the top of my head. I actually wouldn't even know what kind of software I would move on to if I didn't want to use Affinity Designer for this. It's really difficult. Like, I mean, most of, like, there's no software that allows you to play with soldiers, right? Like, that's not a thing. So the best I could do is like these kinds of vector graphics. I mean, I could use Illustrator, but like that's not really a big change in things, right? So we've once again come back to the London Wall line. Everything has become more or less settled, but now we have a lot more artillery on this end. So we're going to be setting up, as you will see, we're going to be setting up for a push. But there's really not a lot of pushing that can happen without the artillery, right? Like, there's the line infantry, actually, the collective is outnumbering the technocracy by a bit. And so what that means is they have to go by the like any technocratic push has to come under the aegis of the artillery, otherwise it just wouldn't work. Yes, that's it. Like, essentially the artillery become the great equalizer that allows the technocracy to actually do its job properly. So the 31st has become Army Group Reserve, and there's now debate going on where to push, right? Because you could imagine a push to this line would actually be hugely beneficial. Yeah, right? Because then you can use less forces to fortify this area, and you could imagine that they could then free up forces. But of course, that happens in the same way for the collective. So the problem is, if you don't destroy their formations, you cannot, like, there is that difficulty of, if you don't destroy their formations, they will come back, and they will come back with a vengeance, right? Which was the whole point of, like, trying to close the salient here. hmm hmm What is Thatcher doing? Thatcher is brooding. Well, he had many brilliant moves that kept getting foiled, right? Like, that's the tragedy of Thatcher, that a lot of his moves would have worked if, just something small changed. Yeah, like, if you remember back here, when we were back down here, uh when Army Group, no, the Army Group East, I'm just gonna keep calling it Army Group because it's easier than Front. When Army Group East managed to cut off the Third Army by pushing all the way to HMRC, right? If the Third Army didn't regain the Tower Bridge line, then that army would have starved. And if the Third Army starved itself into submission, then the front would look completely different, right? Like, essentially, there would have been a huge victory, and it would have placed Thatcher on the rear of any potential counterattack that came in this direction, because any push out in this direction is going to threaten all of that supply. So then this attack that came out of Outgate would never have happened. I'll go back to the oh, I don't even know. Better yet, read the summaries that are right for these. So what? What are you gonna do about it, bro? Yeah, I mean, I know reading is difficult. Actually, interestingly enough, I just read an article in The Economist the other day that talked about how, I can't remember the exact statistic, but something like 49% of Americans are not very good at reading. Something along those lines. It was a shocking number, because it was definitely almost half. It might have been more than half, but it was some, and that's like, what? I can't imagine that. Like, I can't, because it's that's such a scary thought, right? Like, this is, well, and that's my point. That's why I'm laughing at you, bro, because, like, you are essentially, what you just said there was the embodiment of that. Oops. Well, I mean, all right. I'll give you that. Yes. Being a lawyer does change how you view reading, I guess. I'll give you some marks off, or I'll give you some extra credit for being a lawyer. There, happy? Happy, excellent. Okay. So we have the Pomeranians coming in and attempting to hit the flank of the 5th Army, but luckily enough, at least for the 5th, the 60th Corps finished its own left turn right before that happened. And this is down really to the strategic foresight of the 5th, right? Because this would be a hugely unpopular move, both for himself and for morale, because you are giving up space. But that space, remember, the 60th Corps was down here, right? It was strung out along Commercial Road. Oops. And what that would have meant is, like, if the 2nd Pomeranian were still here and the 65th was like still manning this front line, that would have been disastrous. Yeah, absolutely, because what that's saying is then that that the 60th would at best have to hurriedly retreat, and at worst would get surrounded, or at least have some parts of it be surrounded, right? Yeah, exactly. So we're going to have this here. Oh, oops. It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's all good. Don't worry about it. We are at 56 minutes. Yes, I know, but we're almost done, so whatever. This gets settled in. The front has now settled in that nothing's being done on this bridgehead. There's not much that High Branch can really do in the meantime, right? Like, she needs to make sure that either this bridgehead gets contained and taken closed off, or, well, yeah, she needs to either contain it or just completely destroy it, push it back across. But since she can't do either right now, the 5th Army is kind of in a holding pattern. We will see that. Yeah, there will be. I mean, I'm not going to add map to this side just yet. I don't think. No, because there will be. Actually, good call. Let's put one here. Some reinforcements are coming in this direction, and that's 66. And so we're going to have another front line form somewhere in this part. Yes. Well, that is how it goes, right? And so we're going to see these. Yeah, so we're seeing essentially what I talked about just now, which is that River Spring has decided to really push this. Well, so for there are very good reasons for that, at least from the technocratic perspective, which is that their frontline command and control is much better than the collective, which means when the fighting gets really tactical, well, not just tactical, but like tactical and operational, that the collective is at a disadvantage, and that is great, because that's where the technocracy can score its biggest points, right? So we are actually going to form this into a artillery corps like this. So those three artillery these three artillery formations are going to get grouped up into one. Excellent. Like that. And they're only going to have a single attack marker. but it's going to be gigantic. Just wait for it. Well, it's not going to be that gigantic because I think this is as good I can make it 500%, right? Yeah. $100% to 500%. I mean, I can make it bigger by drawing the circle, but I don't think that's necessary. Essentially, all this means is that there's now 3 times the amount of firepower coming down in this area. Actually, let's duplicate that. Like that. Happy? There you go. And there is a supporting move coming from here. That is, oh wait, no, we should be moving this up here. Yep. Like that. And that's just to keep, essentially what it does is keep the 57th core as it is, keeps it nice and contained, right? Like continuously threaten counterattacks in the south so that they are loath to send as much reinforcements north. And all in the meantime, your main attack is in the north to drive it towards the Saint Martin Le Grand. Okay, drive it to the Saint Martin line and then turn left and see if you can do something down here. Yeah. So this is going to be 100. So next turn we'll see reinforcements in that direction. The Pomeranians managed this. This line is now completely on this side of the street. Sure, what's your question? You know, you can just ask. Like literally, that's what we've been doing since the start. No. The question was, will we ever see machine guns? The answer is no. For the simple fact that squirrels don't have that industrial capacity. Remember, we talked about industrial capacity earlier, and how the main difference between World War I and earlier eras was the sheer amount of chemistry and engineering that went into it. Yeah, exactly. And so the point there that I was laboriously trying to make was that there was no way for World War I to have happened earlier because of engineering problems. Yeah, so now we see sort of the issue that we had talked about earlier, which is if the technocracy is able to get into this area, what would happen? And this is exactly what would happen. They would just outflank, and you know, there would be a concentrated push here, but there's just no extra formations left, right? Yeah, there are just no more formations left. You can kind of expect the 12th to try to defend this bridge as well, but the problem is there is enough squirrels around here that makes it a little bit more difficult. Not impossible, just more difficult. Actually, now we should do this. So the 12th is coming in this direction, at least some portion of the 12th, and then yes, Yeah, that is their historical what am I trying to say? Historical what is that word? God damn it. Inspiration. There we go. Shush, I've had a long day, okay? It is Sunday. I still had a long day, alright? Just bear with me. Okay, so that's good. We've done basically everything we could. These are just really like low intensity fighting that's going on. We're going to see, at least a little bit of reinforcements come in this direction, and that's going to force High Branch, of course, to reevaluate what she can do and what her position should be. Right, like right now she's her entire army is sitting in the middle of fundamentally nowhere, with its back completely open. Her mobile forces are half a day's ride away. So it's going to be interesting when those reinforcements do come. But at the same time, for the first army, that there's also that other problem. We should do this. So even while the 12th attempts to pin the 23rd, the 30th will maneuver to the side. The 15th is already on its way north. Yeah, that feels better. Like, obviously the 15th is going to leave regiments, brigades, probably a full brigade, to man this line. So it's definitely moving forward with reduced forces. But if it can do something to dislodge this lot, that would be dangerous, right? Like cutting off the 61st from this line would mean the death of basically the entire 56 Corps. Yeah, that is dangerous. Even if you were to just overrun the First Army headquarters, that would be dangerous. Yes. Well, that is war, isn't it? That is preemptive bombardment of the 301st, yes. This is 9, right? Yes. So right now, yeah, let's just do a quick summary and then we'll be done for today. Essentially, we have the 2nd Army Group in the west, the 1st Army Group in the northeast, and then the 3rd Army. The 3rd Army is independent still of the technocracy. It's independent 3rd Army, and they each have sort of these very long lines. And it turns out that the 2nd Army technically now has the highest fighting power, because it also has the most frontage, or most loaded frontage in front of it, right? Like, yeah, there's a lot of squirrels just like sitting, staring at each other. Yeah, and that's perfectly like reasonable, right? Because remember what happened here. General Elm tore a giant hole in the collective line and then exploited it ruthlessly, and we're going to see where that leads. Yes. Any questions before we finish? Excellent. Yes, actually, that's a good question. The question was, when will this end? Never. No, that's not strictly true. This will end when you guys stop sponsoring it. Really, that's the honest answer. Having said that, just because we continue to do this doesn't mean we can't do it in a different location, doesn't mean we can't start over. I enjoy doing this regardless of where in how it happens. So if you lot are interested in, especially our sponsors, yeah, we like if you lot are interested in, say, like different tech levels, different locations, yeah, let your money do the talking, right? Remember, we're operating under the Citizens United model. Yes, we do have this the military corporation in the Discord. Yes. Mm-hmm. We could. Depends on where. Okay, if you wanted to do this with live, not with squirrels, but with humans, I would probably think more carefully about it, because the issue when we start dealing with sort of humans is that it loses a certain sense of playfulness, right? Because no matter how serious things get here, you can always remember that these are squirrels riding Pomeranians, and that these are squirrels with squirrel engineers are handlers with their rats and their reinforced wooden boards that they're able to use as shields, and that brings a certain amount of irreverence to the subject that lightens the heaviness of talking about military operations and casualties, and like if an entire division got or an entire army got surrounded, what would happen, right? Yeah. So the point remains that yes, we could. I'm not against it. It would have to be crafted really carefully to avoid in general, just to avoid you know causing pain, right? Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, having said that, if it were so that was in to address the human question, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, the exactly, it would have to look something like our military operations questions, which are much more which are which are much more abstract and much more self-contained, because that then takes a lot of the emotion out of it, right? It becomes an abstract concept of playing with toy soldiers, as opposed to all these men and their families, and they're all gonna die. Right. Having said that, again, just coming back to the topic at hand, which is if you guys wanted to put the squirrel somewhere else, absolutely, I would enjoy that, regardless of where we went. So yeah, for sure. Excuse me. Did I get caught by the microphone? My bad. That's my bad. I'll turn away in the future. Oh well, I'm sitting closer to the microphone. Anyway, we are done for today. Thank you very much for watching. Oh yes, I should mention this. If our viewers from outside the Discord, outside the private club, are interested in seeing other locations, other types of, whatever this squirrels at war thing is. If you guys want to see other locations as well, please let me know. I am always open-minded, and like unlike the private club, where they actually have to pay for their opinion to be heard, uh the general public doesn't, right? Like, you guys can just tell me, and it'll well, that's exactly it. That's why the squirrels had been sponsored for so long, because The sponsor didn't actually pay anything besides, I think, the first 2 times where I got a couple of dollars. Because the public is the public, and you guys are you guys. You guys are rich and our captive audience. So as a monopoly, I can charge you guys however much I want. Let me. What was this? 115. The Discord private club is a captive audience and can be charged whatever I want. Aha. Okay, that's it. We're done. No more. In conclusion, then, please, thank you very much for watching. Please download Firefox. Please don't do Chrome. And I shall see you lot on the Discord, and I shall see everyone else tomorrow for our, I don't know, Monday broadcast. Good. Bye.